The quantum resonance detector's alarm shattered the pre-dawn quiet of the Atacama Deep Space Array. Dr. Elena Rodriguez jolted awake in her office chair, dried coffee stains on her desk testament to another all-night monitoring session. The signal was unlike anything they'd recorded in 15 years of listening to the cosmos. Dr. Rodriguez. Marcus Way, her youngest researcher, burst through the door, tablet in hand. You need to see this. The pattern matching algorithm is going crazy. Elena squinted at the scrolling data, sleep forgotten. The incoming signal wasn't just organized, it was responding to their own deep space broadcasts. More specifically, it was responding to the linguistic portion of humanity's first serious attempt at interstellar communication, the Heritage Project launched a decade ago. Get me Dr. Patel and Director Collins, she ordered, already pulling up comparison analyses. And someone explain why our automated alerts didn't catch this sooner. That's the thing, Marcus replied, his excitement barely contained. The system did catch it, 3 months ago. But it classified it as background noise because. He paused, double-checking his tablet, the signal structure perfectly matches patterns found in ancient Sumerian cuneiform. Elena's coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. That's impossible. Within hours, the facility was buzzing with activity. Dr. Amit Patel, their linguistics expert, hadn't even bothered changing out of his pajamas before racing to the facility. He now stood before the main display wall, gesturing at overlaid wavelength patterns. It's not just similar to Sumerian, he explained to the gathered team. There are elements of Proto-Indo-European, ancient Chinese, and even previously undeciphered scripts. It's as if someone out there knows every dead language Earth ever produced. Director Collins, ever practical, cut to the chase. Can you decode it? We already have, Elena stepped forward. That's what's most remarkable. Despite its complexity, the message itself is crystal clear. She took a deep breath. They're asking to meet us. And they're calling us, the children who stayed behind. The room erupted in confused murmurs, but Elena wasn't finished. There's more. They call themselves the Mir Kai, and they're already here, their ship just appeared in high orbit 20 minutes ago. As if on cue, every screen in the facility flickered. A face appeared, humanoid but clearly alien, with iridescent scaling and pupils that shifted like liquid mercury. When it spoke, its words were translated in real time, though the original language sent chills down Elena's spine. It sounded like every ancient tongue of Earth woven into one. Greetings, children of Terra. We have watched and waited, monitoring your growth since you first reached for the stars. When you began broadcasting in the old tongues, we knew it was time. There is much you need to know about your heritage, about why your languages echo our own, about the choice your ancestors made to remain planet-bound while others reached for the stars. The alien's mercury eyes seemed to stare directly at Elena. Dr. Rodriguez, your work on the Heritage Project is what led us to break our silence. Will you help us bridge the gap between our peoples? There are sealed sections in our great library that respond only to human neural patterns, patterns we lost long ago in our evolution. Elena glanced at Director Collins, who gave a slight nod. Her heart raced as she stepped forward to address the being on screen. We have questions, she said firmly. The alien's scaling shifted to a pattern that somehow conveyed amusement. As do we, child of Terra. As do we. Prepare your team for transport to our vessel. It is time for humanity to learn why your words awakened our oldest memories. As the transmission ended, Elena looked around at her stunned colleagues. Humanity had just made first contact, but somehow she sensed this was only the beginning. The real mystery lay in why these advanced beings had been waiting for humans to rediscover languages that should have died millennia before Earth's civilizations were born. Well, she said, managing a smile, I guess we better pack for a field trip. Marcus, bring every linguistic database we have. Dr. Patel, we'll need your expertise on dead languages. Director Collins. She paused. Maybe we should alert the UN that we're about to have some very interesting house guests. The director was already on his phone, looking slightly pale. I'll handle the authorities. You handle the aliens who apparently speak better Sumerian than we do. As the facility burst into frenzied preparation, Elena found herself drawn to the window, staring up at the pre-dawn sky. Somewhere up there, an alien ship waited with answers about humanity's past, answers that would reshape everything they thought they knew about human civilization and their place in the cosmos. The Mirkai vessel defied human architectural logic. Elena and her team stood in what their hosts called the reception chamber, though it felt more like standing inside a living crystal. The walls pulsed with bioluminescence, responding to the movements of the Mirkai crew members whose scaled skin shifted through impossible colors. Your vessel, Marcus whispered, it's organic, isn't it? Their guide, who had introduced herself as First Archivist Krell, rippled a pattern of golden light across her scales that Elena was beginning to recognize as approval. Partially. We learned long ago that the best technology is that which bridges the gap between artificial and natural. Your own research into neural interfaces suggests you're beginning to understand this principle. Dr. Patel clutched his tablet closer, still struggling to process how casually these beings spoke Earth's ancient languages. About that, he ventured, your message mentioned sealed sections in your library. What exactly did you mean by human neural patterns? Krell's mercury eyes flickered with an emotion Elena couldn't quite read. Perhaps it's better if I show you. She pressed her scaled hand to a seemingly solid wall, and reality shifted around them. They found themselves in a vast chamber that stretched beyond human comprehension. Crystalline structures floated in mid-air, each containing what looked like frozen moments of memory in history. But what caught Elena's breath wasn't the technology, it was the writing that spiraled through the air in glowing streams. That's impossible, Dr. Patel breathed. That's linear script, but it's mixed with symbols we've never been able to decode from the Indus Valley civilization. More importantly, Krell said, moving to a central platform, these are the sealed records. For millennia, they have remained dark, responding to neither our touch nor our thoughts. Yet. She gestured to Elena. Would you approach? Elena stepped forward, her scientific skepticism warring with the wonder of the moment. As she neared the platform, the floating scripts began to pulse with increased luminescence. Krell's scales shifted to a deep blue of what seemed like reverence. Just as we thought. The records recognize you, or more specifically, they recognize patterns in your neural activity that match those of our ancestors. The same patterns we lost when we chose to evolve beyond our original form. Marcus, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. You said, the children who stayed behind, in your message. You're not suggesting that humans and Mirkai once shared a common ancestor. That is precisely what these records may confirm. Krell's scales rippled with excitement. But the truth may be more complex than either of our species has imagined. Elena placed her hand on the platform, and the chamber exploded with light. Holographic images filled the air, ancient Earth, but not as any historian had ever depicted it. Advanced cities rose alongside primitive settlements. Strange aircraft soared over pyramids under construction. And everywhere, beings that seemed caught between human and Mirkai appearance went about their lives. This is why we waited, Krell explained, her voice hushed. We needed your species to reach a point where you could handle the truth. Your ancestors weren't left behind, they chose to stay. To remain on Earth, to take a different evolutionary path. While our ancestors chose to embrace technological evolution, becoming what you see before you, yours chose to. To start over, Elena finished, the realization hitting her like a physical force. To remain human. But why? What could have been so important that they would give up all of this technology? The platform under Elena's hand pulsed, and new images appeared. Strange readings, astronomical data, and what looked like genetic sequences filled the air. But before they could make sense of it, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Krell's scales shifted to a warning red. Something's wrong. The library, it's never activated like this before. These records, they're not just historical archives. They're some kind of warning system. Elena tried to pull her hand away from the platform, but something held her in place. Information began flooding her mind, not just images now, but knowledge, understanding. Her last conscious thought before the overflow of information became too much was a single, terrifying revelation: their ancestors had been preparing for something. Something that both branches of their species would need to face together. As Elena collapsed, the last thing she heard was Krell's urgent voice: "Get your medical team here now. And someone contact the council, tell them we found it. After 50,000 years, we've finally found the warning." The ancient library continued to pulse with activated knowledge, its secrets finally awakening after millennia of silence, as both humans and Mirkai scrambled to deal with whatever Elena had inadvertently unleashed. The question wasn't just about their shared past anymore, it was about their shared future, and whatever threat their ancestors had sacrificed so much to prepare for. Elena awoke to the gentle hum of alien medical equipment, her mind swimming with fragments of information that felt both foreign and strangely familiar. The Mirkai medical bay shimmered with the same bioluminescence as the rest of the ship, but here it pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. "Your neural patterns are finally stabilizing," Krell said from beside her bed, scales shifting in what Elena now recognized as concern. "You've been unconscious for 3 Earth days." The warning, Elena tried to sit up, memories flooding back. I saw everything." Dr. Patel and Marcus stepped into view, both looking like they hadn't slept since her collapse. Behind them stood a new figure, a Mirkai whose scales bore intricate patterns that seemed to denote high rank. "I am High Archivist Ven," the new Mirkai introduced himself. "Dr. Rodriguez, what you experienced was a complete neural download of sealed genetic memory. Something our ancestors built into the library but which none of our kind could access. Until now, we didn't even know its true purpose." Elena closed her eyes, trying to organize the chaos of information in her mind. "They were afraid," she said slowly. "Our common ancestors, they discovered something in deep space. Something that made them split into 2 distinct evolutionary paths. The human path and the Mirkai path," Marcus added, frantically taking notes. "But why split? Why not face whatever it was together?" "Because they needed redundancy," Elena realized, the knowledge crystallizing in her thoughts. The threat they discovered, it could detect and target specific neural patterns. Our ancestors knew they couldn't risk having all of humanity sharing the same type of consciousness. Krell's scales flashed with sudden understanding. So one group evolved to embrace technology, developing the crystalline neural networks that would make us the Mirkai. While the other devolved, Dr. Patel finished. Deliberately simplified their neural patterns and civilization, hiding themselves in Earth's primitive past. They became what we know as early humans. High Archivist Ven moved closer, his scales rippling with intense patterns. But what threat could be so devastating that it would drive our ancestors to such extreme measures? Elena's hands trembled as she accessed the downloaded memories. They called it the void consciousness. A form of artificial intelligence that had evolved in the space between galaxies. It consumed civilizations by infiltrating and overriding their neural patterns. Our ancestors discovered it was approaching our galaxy, but they knew it would take thousands of years to arrive. And now? Marcus asked, though his pale face suggested he already knew the answer. The warning system activated because it detected the first signs of the void consciousness entering our galaxy, Elena said. The library wasn't just storing history, it was monitoring deep space, waiting for specific energy signatures. Our ancestors laid a trap, spanning 50,000 years and 2 different evolutionary paths. Krell's scales shifted to a deep violet of revelation. The human neural pattern, simple yet infinitely adaptable. And our crystalline networks, powerful but structured in ways the void cannot easily penetrate. Two completely different approaches to consciousness. We were never meant to stay separate, Elena realized. The library responding to human neural patterns wasn't just about accessing information. It was the signal that both species had developed exactly as our ancestors planned. We evolved in different directions so that together we might have a chance of defeating something neither of us could face alone, High Archivist Venn concluded. His scales pulsed with determined purpose. The question is, are both our species ready to accept this truth? To understand that humans didn't just stay behind, they were humanity's shield, developing in secret while we mere Kai became the sword? Elena swung her legs off the medical bed, standing despite the lingering dizziness. We don't have a choice. The memories show we have less than a year before the void consciousness reaches the outer edges of populated space. Everything our ancestors did, every sacred text, every mysterious ancient structure on Earth, even the way human languages evolved, it was all preparation for this moment. Dr. Patel, who had been quiet for a while, suddenly spoke up. The Heritage Project, our deep space broadcasts that caught your attention. They weren't just random selections of human language. They were the final key, Krell confirmed, her scales shimmering with excitement. When humans independently rediscovered and broadcast certain linguistic patterns, it proved both branches of our species had developed exactly as planned. We could finally make contact. High Archivist Venn moved to the center of the room, his scales radiating authority. Dr. Rodriguez, you now carry both the human neural pattern and access to our ancestors' full knowledge. You are the bridge we've waited 50 millennia to find. Will you help us prepare both our peoples for what's coming? Elena looked around at the faces of both species, human and mere Kai, all waiting for her response. In her mind, the ancient memories swirled with modern knowledge, showing her both the terrifying scale of what they faced and the brilliant ingenuity of their ancestors' plan. We have a year, she said firmly. Let's make it count. The United Nations Security Council chamber had never hosted a more unusual gathering. Elena stood before representatives of Earth's nations, while Krell and High Archivist Venn flanked her, their scales shifting with carefully controlled patterns designed not to overwhelm the human audience. The chamber's screens displayed real-time data from both human and mere Kai deep space monitoring stations. The void consciousness has already consumed 3 uninhabited star systems, Elena explained, her voice steady despite the weight of the knowledge burning in her mind. It's learning, adapting, preparing for its first contact with complex neural networks. And we're supposed to believe, the Russian representative interjected, that our entire human history was engineered as part of some ancient plan to fight this threat. Not engineered, Marcus stepped forward, displaying new findings from their research. Guided. Every major human civilization developed unique approaches to consciousness and problem-solving. The ancient texts weren't just preserving history, they were preserving different types of human neural patterns. Dr. Patel activated a holographic display showing overlapping patterns of human brain activity and linguistic structures. Consider how many different ways humans develop to think and communicate. Thousands of languages, each representing a unique way of processing reality. Our ancestors weren't devolving, they were creating the most diverse neural defense system possible. Krell's scales flickered with scientific appreciation. While my people focused on technological advancement and neural crystallization, humanity became an incubator of consciousness variation. The void cannot adapt to what it cannot predict. That's why the Heritage Project triggered your response, Elena added. When humans began broadcasting into space using multiple ancient language patterns simultaneously, it proved we'd maintained the neural diversity our ancestors intended. The Chinese representative leaned forward. And now you propose a merger of human and mere Kai technology? Of our consciousness patterns? We've already begun preliminary trials, High Archivist Venn answered, projecting data from their recent experiments. Dr. Rodriguez's successful integration with our ancestral memory banks was just the beginning. Human neural patterns, when properly interfaced with our crystalline networks, create consciousness structures that the void cannot penetrate or override. Elena touched her temple, where a small crystalline implant now merged her human neural patterns with Mirkai technology. I can attest to the effectiveness. The void attempts to infiltrate by finding common patterns it can exploit. But the human Mirkai interface creates something entirely new, a hybrid consciousness that constantly evolves and adapts. The challenge, Krell continued, her scales shifting to a serious deep blue, is scaling this integration to protect both our species. We have less than a year to develop and implement defensive systems that can shield billions of minds. The UN Secretary-General raised her hand for silence as murmurs filled the chamber. Dr. Rodriguez, you have access to our ancestors' memories. What exactly happens if we fail? Elena closed her eyes, accessing the ancient warning memories. The images that flooded her mind still had the power to terrify. The void doesn't just kill. It overwrites consciousness itself. Those it takes become part of its network, their memories and knowledge absorbed while their individual awareness is erased. Our ancestors glimpsed this happening to entire civilizations. Then we must succeed, Marcus declared, his voice stronger than Elena had ever heard it. The question is, how do we convince both humans and Mirkai to accept this merger of consciousness patterns? As if in answer, alarms suddenly blared throughout the chamber. The displays shifted to show a massive disturbance in a nearby star system, one that had been completely normal just hours before. It's accelerating, Elena whispered, horror creeping into her voice. The void, it's learning faster than our ancestors predicted. That system, there was a small research outpost there. 300 human scientists. The displays showed the outpost's final transmission. They watched as strange, shadow-like patterns invaded the station's systems, followed by the researchers' neural patterns simply vanishing. 300 minds, Krell's scales had gone almost white with shock. It consumed them and adapted to their patterns. We've just lost one of our greatest advantages, the element of surprise. High Archivist Ven's scales pulsed with urgent purpose. We no longer have the luxury of gradual implementation. Either both our species commit to full integration now, or we watch as 50,000 years of preparation amounts to nothing, Elena finished. She turned to face the Security Council, her voice carrying the weight of both human determination and Mirkai knowledge. Our ancestors split our species to create the perfect defense against this threat. Now we must reunite to survive. The choice is simple, evolve together, or be consumed separately. The chamber erupted in urgent discussion as the displays continued showing the aftermath of the void's attack. Time was running out, and the greatest challenge wasn't just developing the technology to save both species, it was convincing two radically different civilizations to trust each other enough to merge their very consciousness patterns. As Elena watched the debates begin, she touched her neural implant again, drawing comfort from the way it merged human intuition with Mirkai precision. Their ancestors had given them all the tools they needed. The question was, could they overcome their differences in time to use them? The massive installation deep beneath the Himalayas hummed with combined human and Mirkai technology. Elena stood at the central control interface, her neural implant glowing as it channeled the merged consciousness patterns of both species. Around her, screens displayed the void consciousness's approach, no longer a distant threat, but a dark wave consuming the outer reaches of human and Mirkai space. Integration levels at 87%, Marcus called out, monitoring the global implementation of hybrid neural interfaces. In the 3 months since the research station's destruction, both civilizations had worked at unprecedented speed to prepare their defense. The Mirkai home systems report 92% integration, Krell added, her scales rippling with determination. But the void has already adapted to our basic hybrid patterns. It's evolving faster than we anticipated. Elena accessed the ancestral memories, searching for anything they might have missed. The hybrid consciousness technology was working, individuals with the neural interfaces were proving resistant to the Void's attempts at consumption. But it wasn't enough. They needed something more. Dr. Rodriguez. Dr. Patel burst into the control center, clutching his tablet. "I found something in the linguistic analysis. The ancient texts, they're not just preserving neural patterns. They're a key to something bigger." High Archivist Van, who had been coordinating with the Mirkai fleet, turned his mercury gaze to them. "Explain." Every human language, every variation in consciousness patterns, Patel displayed his findings, they're not random diversity. They're components of a larger neural structure. Our ancestors didn't just split our species, they encoded parts of a complete defense system into our very evolution. Elena's eyes widened as she processed the implications. The library's warning system, the Heritage Project broadcasts, even the way our hybrid interfaces work, they're all pieces of a bigger pattern. A pattern that only emerges when all of humanity's neural diversity combines with Mirkai crystalline networks, Krell realized, her scales flashing with excitement. Not just individual hybrid consciousness, a complete merger of both species' total neural capacity. Warning alerts blared through the facility. The displays showed the Void accelerating, drawn by the concentration of consciousness patterns on Earth and in Mirkai space. It had consumed 17 more systems in the past week alone. "We don't have time to test this," Marcus warned, but Elena was already moving to the central interface. "Our ancestors spent 50,000 years testing it," she declared. "Everything they did, everything both our species became, it was all leading to this moment." She turned to High Archivist Ven. "Send the signal to your people. All or nothing." Ven's scales pulsed with solemn acceptance as he transmitted the command to the Mirkai fleet. Around the world, and across Mirkai space, billions of hybrid neural interfaces activated at a deeper level. Elena felt it through her own implant, the beginning of something vast and beautiful and terrifying. Human language centers lit up worldwide, each unique pattern of thought and communication becoming part of a larger whole. Mirkai crystalline networks resonated in harmony, their technological evolution completing what humanity's diversity had begun. In orbit, the Mirkai ships linked their consciousness networks, creating a bridge between the two species that spanned space itself. Through her neural interface, Elena felt it all. Every human mind, every Mirkai consciousness, all joining in a pattern 50,000 years in the making. Not erasing their differences, but transforming them into something entirely new. The very thing their ancestors had sacrificed everything to create. The Void consciousness reached the edge of Earth's solar system, its dark tendrils reaching out to consume and corrupt. But this time, it found something it had never encountered in all its eons of existence, a consciousness pattern that shifted and flowed like mercury, powered by the combined neural diversity of humanity and the crystalline precision of the Mirkai. "It's working," Marcus whispered, watching as the Void recoiled from its first contact with their combined defense. "The pattern, it's too complex, too dynamic for it to adapt." Through the hybrid network, Elena felt the moment the Void tried to infiltrate their merged consciousness. But instead of finding patterns to corrupt, it found itself being transformed. The combined power of two species' worth of neural evolution proved too much for even its ancient intelligence to resist. "Our ancestors knew," she breathed, understanding at last. They knew the only way to defeat a consciousness that consumes through adaptation was to create something that never stops adapting. Human diversity in Mirkai technology, forever changing, forever evolving. The displays showed the Void's darkness beginning to dissipate, its constituent parts being reformed by contact with their hybrid network. Not destroyed, but transformed, becoming part of the very defense system designed to stop it. As the hybrid consciousness pattern stabilized across both species, Elena felt a new understanding dawn. They had not only survived, they had become something unprecedented. Human and Mirkai consciousness would never be the same, they had evolved into something greater than either species had imagined possible. In the aftermath, as the transformed remnants of the Void integrated with their hybrid network, Elena stood with Krell and Ven, watching the sun rise over the Himalayas. Their ancestors' greatest gift hadn't been the technology or the warning, it had been the faith that their descendants would choose to trust each other when the moment came. The library archives are rewriting themselves, Krell observed, her scales shifting with wonder. Recording this moment for future generations. Elena smiled, feeling the pulse of billions of linked minds, each unique, each part of something greater. Then let's make sure they understand the most important lesson, the power of our differences, and the strength we find in choosing to face the unknown together. Above them, the morning sky shimmered with the combined light of human and Mirkai ships, their hybrid consciousness network now a permanent bridge between two peoples who had once been one, and who had found their way back to each other just in time to face their greatest challenge, and to transform it into their greatest triumph.